guys doing all right?
Yeah.
I get the unenviable position of doing after lunch coma, so bam, wake up. Okay, so I'm Mark Rocket. I am the Director of Data Attribution and Insights. We're going to talk about attribution. So we'll get going, make sure that we've got a lot of time for questions. We'll go from there. So why attribution? Why it's important? Why should you think about it? A couple reasons. Number one, if you're not, you are more than likely you are wasting money in big ways. Other reason is this very smart man, John Wanamaker, who had Wanamaker department stores years and years ago, probably 100 years ago in the traditional world, said half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. And in the last click model that the majority of advertisers are still using, they still have that problem. Now, the good news is because of digital and because of the trackability of it and the ability to capture that data and review it, we can tell you exactly which 50% isn't working and ultimately get you to a point where 100% of your media is working. And that's the goal of attribution. That's why it's so important. So how do we start? What's the attribution spectrum in my mind? We talked about last click. Now, last click gets a bad rap. It's a necessary evil. If you're using tag management, if you are conditionally firing tags to give credit to one provider, especially in pricing models where you have multiple revenue sharing or CPA kind of environments, there is a real good benefit of having last click as a decision-making process. So it's a necessary evil, and it is what everyone's used to. And believe it or not, 70 to 80% of all advertisers are still using this model. Now, these guys are finally realizing we got to get out of this. There's a lot more value in what we're doing, but we need to be able to prove it. So what they're doing, though, is jumping in the deep end of the pool, and they're getting into these advanced algorithm models with offline integration, media mix modeling, which is all great, but the problem is a lot of these parties, these third-party tools, which we are big fans of, and we work with all of them. I'm going to give you a slide next that's going to tell you that. They all are great, but they all have a black-boxed advanced algorithm that's their proprietary technology and will not tell you anything about it. And in fact, you try to ask them, they'll say, well, we have a PhD back at the house. He's the only person who really knows what's going on. And by the way, he's just a statistical economics guy who doesn't really know a lot about digital marketing. I'm making that part up, but you get the point, right? So it's great to get there, but you don't need to jump right in. There's a lot of simple things you can do to understand attribution and get there in a much more understanding and easy way. So what we recommend is let's do simple attribution. Let's just stay focused in the online world initially, because we have incredible data and we can look at actual conversion paths of consumers on their way to purchasing something. And let's just look at how the channels are working and how all of those things are working, one together, but then within channels, how they're being measured. And then we can test and learn, but more importantly, we can build trust as a group. When I say group, I mean agency and client, so that you have a good understanding of what attribution is, how it works, and then ultimately together we can work to build an advanced algorithm that you have input to, that you have buy-in, that you can explain up the ladder to your superiors to make sure that everyone gets it. And then again, you'll do that to get to the advanced algorithm. Now, that being said, we are certified partners with Visual IQ and Abacus. We have relationships right now with every one of these companies. Now, we have our own tool as well as iProspect, but we can manage third-party relationships in one of two ways. We can contract on your behalf to create relationships and then help you to manage those, or we can actually work with a relationship you've already created and make sure that it's being managed and utilized properly. So a couple things. Attribution. To be successful, you absolutely have to have a couple things. Channel agnostic. The company, the person, the agency that is managing your attribution cannot be fearful for making the right decision for your business. If we manage search but don't manage display, I can't be scared to say, let's cut prospecting display because there's a point of diminishing returns and you're going to get a significantly greater impact from prospecting display. So let's move from search to display, and all of a sudden 50% of my revenue goes away. That's not a smart business decision as an agency, but it's the right thing to do. So as the attribution provider, that is something that we hold very close to our heart and are very big promoters of that. no black box. You guys have to understand what's going on. Otherwise, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to buy in. And then it's kind of like wasted activity. This is the reality. So trust. Trust is not just agency-client relationship, but it's agency-partner relationship. So rocket fuel, for example. We might say, or QuantCast when we were talking on the show yesterday, your job is to drive people to the homepage or maybe to add to cart. And then I don't want you to talk to them anymore because the next person, the retargeting partner, is going to take over. And I don't want you competing for the same cookie pools. So it's easy to monitor, but no one really does that. So that's what the split funnel is. So, but because of that, because Rocket Fuel and QuantCast and Cerno, Adroit are all driving to a conversion, their algorithm is set up to that, and you step it back and saying, I want you to drive to this action, it's going to be a lot harder for them to know what's going on, and they're going to have to trust that you are working with them to optimize them to get new people. And it's a little bit of a change, but you may have to have like hybrid pricing models to make sure that they're being taken care of, if you will, because it's a partnership, and you've got to make sure that you're working all together. So must-haves, one source of truth, that's it, bottom line. Whatever you are tracking, whatever you are managing, email, affiliate, display, search, retargeting, anything that you've got running, you ideally want it to come into one system. And ultimately, that system is going to have a unifying cookie ID or some ID that's going to allow you to look at exposure level data and build consumer paths on an individual conversion basis. So you can apply attribution modeling and a lot of other neat things. Those are the two things. If you walk away, just know that you need to do that. Now, if you only have two things, search and display, we can work with that. We can optimize within channel, cross-channel of those. But the more you have in there, the more accurate and the more beneficial it's going to be. So differentiators, okay? So if you're using iProspect or you're using any third party, data capture and attribution modeling are essentially the same. I mean, modeling is going to be different, the way they look at things, but the data is there and they apply a model that gives output. So the differentiators is number one, obviously you have media that's going to be driving your planning and what you're trying to accomplish, but then you have measurement strategy and implementation. So everyone's heard the term garbage in, garbage out. If you do not have your data set up properly, then anything that you get on the output is going to be either useless or tainted. So you've got to make sure that everything is happening properly up front. Then, after you get the data in and the model happens, you need to have talent that is going to be able to analyze that data for actionable insights. Now, one thing about the third-party providers and why we work with them in relationships as well as our own tool is their software. And if you know anything about valuations of companies, they want to remain a software company because their valuation might be 10x. Versus getting into the service side of things, their valuation might go to 2x because service is not sustainable where software is, right? So they all want to create a one-size-fits-all mentality, that black box mentality, but ultimately give you the keys and say, now you figure out what this means and how to activate it. So no matter who you're using, a big differentiator is the knowledge of the channels, the knowledge of the holistic goals and objectives of a client, that you can create actionable insights, not easy little ahas. Isn't that a neat thing that this is happening? But if it's not replicable, it means nothing. So you need to be able to find actionable insights that you can repeat. And then how quickly can you get those back into the planning funnel? And one of the beauties of iProspect is our D&I team can figure this out, walk right down the hall to the planners and the search engineers saying, here's what I'm seeing, let's go dig in and find out what's happening. And that's really kind of a neat synergy that we have. So we talked about not actionable insights, we did talk about that, but we talked about exposure level or cookie level exposure data. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is on a unique sale or in B2B a lead, we're trying to put together a conversion path of a consumer. And here, this is a simple path with 10 partners involved. Here you've got QuantCast, could be Rocket Fuel or Adroit. From an impression and introducer standpoint, you've got non-brand search, brand search, net mining, say as a retargeting impression or partner, and then link share. Those, very easily understandable conversion path, right? So a last click model is the last click. One interesting thing about last click that people don't always realize is last click doesn't mean last exposure. Last exposure, because a click is always going to trump an impression in terms of the hierarchical decision making of how that you apply credit. What becomes interesting is this click could happen 2 days ago, but this impression or this series of retargeting impressions could have happened 5 minutes or 10 minutes in front of the conversion. And oh, by the way, it could have had a 20% off coupon and actually had a visual of the product you just put into your cart in the ad. So it just makes you think differently. Now, the other way that we'll look at it, and everyone looks at this, and we look at it this way too, because that's something that in real time, very quickly, you can find out how things are performing. Now, what we will do is we'll look at first exposure attribution. What was the first thing that the consumer engaged with as they again, engaged with your ad and went down the conversion path? Now, the interesting thing with here is, say if you have 100,000 conversions in a month and 70% of those are repeat, then using this methodology is going to skew you to all the closers, because email and brand search, because people already know about you. So you need to be able to isolate conversion paths based on new to file customers. And the way that we do that is when a sale happens or a lead happens on your site, you will have a unique ID, you will pass that through to us, and then we will match our data to your data and allow you to give us non-personally identifiable information like new to file, like catalog receipt, like proximity to retail. Some of the other things we've gotten are credit source from analytics. And whatever you have that is of value, we can actually bring that in. I know we were talking last night about some of the great stuff that you have at Sonos with, with your, yeah, absolutely, very cool. Yeah, cross-channel, that's something I didn't even mention. One of the things that we can capture from a data perspective is if someone logs in, they log in, you basically know, they have told you as a site, who am I? And you have permission to contact me because I logged in. Well, if you can pass through that identifier, that non-personally identifiable information that says this person is a client or whatever, that user ID can then be matched up. So cross-device, if they log in on both, we can then take the activity of both devices, cross that up and see a path, and then we can do cross-device attribution as well as entire path across devices. Same thing if someone drops the cookies or cleans their cookies, we can actually get two disparate cookie paths, we find out they're the same person. So you can start to bring all that stuff together. Now, another one that Google Analytics Premium and a lot of other models use that we don't like, but it has value, they all have value in some one way or another, is equal attribution based on exposure. So this is a 10 exposure path. You're giving each exposure a piece of the pie. Quantcast has 3 exposures. That's going to get 30% of the credit. It's not necessarily representative of their value, especially when you think about impression versus click and all of those other things, right? So it's going to overflate your high volume activities. What we do in terms of that simple online attribution, that first look that is something that is easily explained, easily grasped, and becomes a foundation or a base for you to build upon advanced algorithm, is what we call equal attribution based on touch. So if we have 3 Quantcast impressions, we will actually lump them together in one touch, and then we will equally distribute value among the touches. Now, we're always going to look at non-brand versus brand separately, because while they're in the same channel, they are totally different tactical ways of looking at things strategically. And then prospecting display and retargeting display, we're always going to look differently. Now, this is what we find to be a nice, easy way to understand and help people, right? You can get into advanced algorithm and machine learning, and we have our tools that do that. We have linear regression, time decay, you name it, we have done it, and we've looked at it. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is you're going to see very similar results no matter what model that you use, just in varying degrees. So we believe in a principle called Occams Razor, which is if you have competing theories that are essentially telling you the same thing, that the simplest is always going to be preferred to the more complex. So that being said, because we have done analysis over hundreds of clients, hundreds of data sets, to find out what is the distribution of value, you're going to see the same pattern recurring over and over again. Your closers, your lower funnel, brand search, retargeting display, affiliate, email, among others, are going to lose value. And the upper funnel, non-brand search, prospecting display, content, social, those things that typically never win on a last click, but you just know that they're working, but you can't justify it. That's what attribution is going to allow you to do. Now, this redistribution is going to happen the same basic way every single time. It's just going to be in varying degrees. So that's why we kind of like to keep it simple and get you guys on board in a way that you can explain it so that we can move forward together to do more advanced stuff. Now, Rosé in the forecasting kind of touched that this is coming. This is cross-channel impact. So using algorithm and using correlation numbers between the different tactics, we're going to be able to forecast ad money in one spot, where does it actually get paid off? Because it's not always within tactic. So in this case, we talked about the closers, right? We've got brand search, retargeting display, affiliate, and email. These are all essentially capacity constrained. If you're managing your brand search properly, there is no additional inventory you can buy. You need to be maximizing your exposure so you're always there. Retargeting display, yeah, of course, you could dump a whole lot of money into that, but the reality is you're just going to be upping your frequency and having a bad experience. If you're doing that right, you should only have a limited amount of activity. Same thing with affiliate and email. So the only way to get more volume in these closers is to build your universe by creating more volume in the upper funnel. So essentially, we might have a one-to-one, say non-brand search. I know for most people in here, a one-to-one in non-brand search would be like, woohoo, let's keep going. You know, that would be great because it's really hard, especially if you have a competitive product and a competitive category. But let's just say we're spending $1, getting $1 back, and you as a client comes to us and says, I have an extra $1 million, where are you gonna put it? Well, the only place I can put it is in here. I mean, obviously social and content and some other things, but they're all upper funnel stuff. And the reality is, I'm gonna add money there, but because this is not sustainable as you start to increase your volume on generic search, non-brand search, or you start to increase your long tail keywords to try to get more potential opportunity, it's never going to scale. So you're going to see a less volume here in terms of a direct response. But what you're going to see here is all of these other tactics are going to have a little bump because they're all performance. They're all cost per click or cost per conversion. If you get more people in your email mix, you're going to be sending more emails. So there's always going to be a cost associated. But what you're going to see is a tremendous lift in revenue in these other channels that is 100% correlated to this. And the cross-channel attribution, we have our model. I don't want to say it's 100%, but we've used it for 2 of our clients, and it is working well. And it's just more of an opportunity to scale and continue to add statistical analysis to it. Part of the integration, which is so cool, is the Cavario team has a PhD in stats, economics, and all this great stuff. So I can't wait to get him to vet out our analyst, who is phenomenal as well. So it's going to be really cool to get this so it's nailed. But again, this isn't a one-size-fits-all either. You have to have the attribution data because different models will have different relationships. But the goal is, and we're really close to doing it, is spend $1 here, you'll see a 1x increase here, 2x, 3x, whatever it is, so that you can start to truly show what's happening. That make sense? So the process, this is the last thing, and we'll get into some questions. So there's a setup, there's consulting. How are you managing your tactics? Which tactics are you using? Which ones does iProspect manage? Which ones do your other partners manage? What's the one source of truth? How are you tracking all of that ad serving? What's the volume of your tactics? Because we need to figure that out because there's a lot of data we'd be capturing and managing for you. And then the integration of your data with our data in terms of unique identifier integration. And then the first thing we're going to do is once we have everything set up and cranked and QA'd and we know that it's working properly, we're just going to listen. You already got a campaign running. Let's just let it continue to run. And what I call listen, let's just see how it's working. And we can find, because one of the things about having this granular data, at least in the iProspect world, because we have the granular data that we build attribution, we can dive into specific channels and do certain things like retargeting adherence. Or negative retargeting adherence. So if someone buys a product, I want my retargeter to stop sending that person ads, or cross-sell or upsell or do something else. You can monitor that. It's like a kid going into a candy store. If they know you're watching, they're going to behave themselves. But as soon as you turn your back, they're going to steal you blind. And it's the same thing, no offense to our partners here, because we've worked with a lot of the partners that are sponsoring them, all of them we've worked with and are very confident in their abilities. So, but that being said, there's certain things like impression overload. We actually loaded all of the data for one client from February. We ran that and we determined that 30% of all of the ads on a CPM pricing model were fraudulent. So one cookie received 19,000 impressions in a week. It's not possible. So we actually pulled the report, we gave it to the team, we said, here's what you say, and they went to the network, and they got to make it. And it's just as easy as that. But say if you have two partners in play, what is their cookie crossover? Because you want incrementality, not duplication. If you have two prospecting groups and they're going after the same audience, it's not beneficial. So let's look for different DMPs or abilities to find cookie pools to incrementally add value and get more people into the mix and make sure your dollars are working for you more. And then after we've listened, we've optimized in-channel, we've optimized cross-channel, then we're going to start testing. That's when you've got a baseline plan, we've brought everything back, we've got a really solid base, and then we can start adding in incremental partners, incremental keyword sets or strategies, and we can start to add those in and see how they impact things. But we'll also be working on an advanced model, which will allow us to get to the forecasting. And that typically takes about 6 months. But it can be different because a lot of it is like how quickly can you get this set up, and will your partners like LinkShare actually implement your code, which we've worked with them before, so they should. But so that's it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question around, so what's the lag between activity and then results and informing back to a cycle of informing and discussing with strategy teams or planning teams?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to depend on your sales cycle.
Sure.
So the Research Square, who we had up on the main stage, they had, it was about a 5-week time period. But say a car might be 9 months. Yeah. So you need to kind of have enough data across so you can get that sales cycle in play, because you might have retargeting in the mix on someone who had been introduced a while, and that introducer for that is going to look like a retargeting, and that can't happen. So you kind of get a lot of that noise cleaned out, starting to get it fresh. So it'll depend on your sales cycle, but we will start to provide data about the second week. We won't make any real decisions on it, but it'll start. So we'll, on a weekly basis, we would give you your last click, we would give you your first click or your introducer, and that cost per introducer, and then we will give you an equal attribution based on touch. So you can see clearly the distribution from last click to the others, and you'll be able to see how that works. And then we'll just, over time, once we get to a certain point and know a little bit more about timing and statistically significant data, we'd make that call. But we start looking at it quickly, but we may need a little bit more time to make some decisions on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us some real-life client examples where you've actually applied attribution and the impact that it's had on the media plan and the changes that you guys have made?
Sure. So initially, you're going to use it. It's going to be directional. So you're going to be able to say, we know that same pattern. That's the thing that's like a silver bullet isn't what you're going to get. We look at it, you're going to get directional, right? So you're going to get directional on what's working, what's not. And I can tell you it's going to be social and non-brand search, and it's typically that way. And what we will do then, we'll dive deeper into each channel, and then what we'll do is when we test, we're incrementally adding new partners into the mix, and then we're validating what we're doing. Especially when you're trying to add money to the upper funnel and you continue to look at last click, it's never going to work. So in real time or in weekly chunks, we're saying, here is the value that you're seeing. So when you see that you might have had a 50-cent return on ad spend in in non-brand search, but when you look at the re-attributed value, it's a 8 to 1. It makes it a lot easier to have conversations with upper management to say, this spending is valuable, and here's how I can prove it. So, does that make sense?
Yeah. I was just more like, do you have any, client examples that sort of come to mind where you've drastically changed perhaps some of the allocations of spend in the channel?
So I won't say the name, but yes, one of our clients, we were running some CPM scale activity. When our CPM were running from a scale perspective, we're looking to get roughly around a 1-to-1 return. One of the things we found is we found two partners that worked really, really well together, driving a 1-to-1, but together they're about 0.8. Individually 1-to-1, together a 0.8. What the attribution allowed us to see is really what they were doing to lift the brand. We had one partner that was doing fantastic at targeting people that were more in that shopping mode, and they were actually driving more towards the affiliate channel. These were consumers we didn't have previously. They were new customers. So we saw a lift in the affiliate channel during that time frame. I think it was between 7 and 9%, that we couldn't account for anything else but this, because we had the time analysis on all the activity. We had the other side that was really doing well almost as a reminder to drive people back to the email. As Mark said, they had them, but it doesn't mean they're engaged. Just because they're receiving an email doesn't mean they're opening it, doesn't mean they're clicking on it. but we leveraged them and their promos to get them back into the email. We actually saw a lift in the email conversion rates as well. So this was a situation where after testing 3 or 4 different people, we allowed our CPM scale to come in just under a 1-to-1 return, but grow the brand upwards to, I think it was close to 9 to 11% overall, based on how they were helping drive other channels as well as brand search.
Do you have any preferred campaign management platforms that you would claim as your preferred single source of truth?
We love DoubleClick. I mean, I've been working with DoubleClick for 15 years, but so is iProspect. I mean, we've been working with them for a while. But a couple things. I mean, there's they're a great tag management system that no one knows about because that's not what they sell. They sell themselves as an ad server, but the tag management is critical and it's huge and they're really good at it. And the integration with DS3, Marin and Kenshu are great. And we will use them and track them, but you are limited in terms of how detailed you can track because you're essentially giving click trackers to there because you need to get it cookied in the same system. So if you use DS3, you're getting all the granular detail, and DS3 allows you to do natural search tracking, which is an add-on service that they have, which will bring in organic search as well as another unique source. So it just gives you a lot more information. Yeah.
I'm curious, so since we're sort of on the Google stack there, how does their odometry
right now they are not integrated at all.
I've seen the
Yeah.
church and state thing.
Right.
Do you anticipate them at least using some of the data if you were basically
Yeah.
pay for odometry services, would you be able to leverage DS3 data better? Or do we know that yet?
Don't know that. There's no integration yet right now. Like one thing that's good about the Google stack is Google Analytics Premium, which most people are kind of leveraging because it's a great product. It's really inexpensive. So they're integrating with DoubleClick so you can get the view through because that's critical. You've got to have the view through activity and you can match up DCM, DoubleClick Campaign Manager, and Google Analytics Premium so you can bring the impressions in. And what we're looking to do is a one source of truth, which we've seen some problems in the granularity and the accuracy of the data, but as Google Analytics Premium, you can actually export all of the raw data, which they recommend that you do because their system is solely based on that equal attribution on impression. So if you want to do anything with time analysis or anything like that, you would have to export that. So we're trying to figure out, because that would be a really easy solution for a lot of clients if we could make that the one source. But again, we've had a little bit of problems just with the workings of the data. But we do know that odometry does not work with that yet, but that is on their roadmap is to make some connections. And yeah, they want to leverage all the Google stuff they can. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time, I'm afraid, guys.
Okay.
It's a lot of full.
There are
Okay.
business cards here, please take one. We will say we are not fully integrated from the Rocket side, so the email addresses are not working right now. Reach
But they
out
will
to
soon.
leads, and we have phone numbers.